All right, and we are live. Welcome back to our coverage of the Australian election. It's been a busy 2 weeks, and I want to start off with Labor's housing scheme, which basically means the government can basically own part of your house. You want to start with that one, Drew?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of scary how bad it is in Australia. For me, I think the high level conversation is like, how bad is it that we need our governments to buy our houses for us? Like, that's how far this ship has sailed. That's the position we find ourselves in. In terms of the policy, what basically to map it out, it's Labor policy. So Anthony Albanese and the gang have decided that it's a great idea for the government to own or to put up 30% equity for houses that are currently standing or 40% for a new build. And they would effectively own that part of or that much equity in your home, and to enable people in the lower stratosphere of the economy to get into the property market. So well-intentioned policy, of course, and some have labelled it communist in nature. Part of the Great Reset, I think, was being thrown around, or it's the sort of World Economic Forum conspiracy where you will own nothing and be happy. And it feels it smells a little like socialist housing at the end of the day. I know from my experience, and this sort of gives you a baseline metric to which to judge this policy on. In where I live currently in Victoria, which is soon to change, we have a huge housing affordability issue. It is a massive issue in that the prices over the pandemic have skyrocketed. We've seen rental prices increase 20% year on year over the pandemic, and we've seen property prices do the same thing. So massive pressure on cost of living there, that we hope is addressed by policy in some way. And it's just sad to me that Labor feels compelled to buy a house for you. That's kind of where we are. But those cost of living pressures are real, and that's a real issue that's impacting voters in a meaningful way. So I would hope to see competing policy out there. And I have yet to. Has anyone seen policy from the Liberals on this? Can anyone talk to that?
No.
Yeah, it seems a bit vacant and void in that space there. So
there's another party, but
well, I was going to say the UAP policy I've heard seems decent, where they will do tax write-off for 30% of your mortgage payments. I believe something around that area, which to me makes a bit more sense. But it's pretty dire when it gets to something like this Labor policy being we'll buy a house for you.
I think the thing to keep in mind as well is this policy. I think this is just a blatant vote grab. I don't actually think there's much behind what they're thinking, because it's only for 10,000 people. Like the limit, it's limit for 10,000. Yeah, it's only for 10,000 people. So and I believe, I need to check it again, but I believe that there's no what do you call it? Like the grading or whatever, scaling, whether you benefit. It's basically open to everyone. So the only people that are going to get benefit from it are generally the people that they're going to look after. So it's not going to, this policy isn't going to help the people on the bottom like they say they are. It's just it's a blatant vote grab where you can run headlines saying we're going to do this system so you can buy a house, but then realize that most people don't qualify for it. So it's
wow,
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, it's not a good policy at all.
I know
the UAP one's better. I like that you can claim, possibly claim your asset for your tax. The Lib Dems do also have the raising the tax-free threshold, which that then allows everyone on the lower end of the market more money in their pocket to cope with the cost of living that you say. So to have it at 40K tax-free is it's not a policy. It's not like giving you something, but it's actually just not taking it away from you. And it allows people that if you're earning 40 grand a year, you don't pay tax, which is massive for someone on that sort of that wage. So,
huge.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And plus, with that money as well that the government is spending to buy you a house, you know, they don't pay rent, they don't use it to, you know, help mow the lawn or anything like that. They don't use it to help you. It's just they buy part of the house, and then when you sell it, they get an interest in it. And in fact, if you die with the loan still there, the government can just take their part of the house by forcibly selling a house. Like if the government wants to, when you die, it's either you renegotiate the deal, you keep the deal going, or the government forces you to sell the house, and the money is split between the government and the heir to the property.
That's not in the brochure, I'm tipping.
No. It never is.
No, it's not.
Yeah. It's a blatant pre-election vote grabber. I mean, that's why I know the details are out. That's why you've got to look into it to find out that it's only for 10,000 people, and it's a red herring basically, and it's because they think voters are stupid. And I think this election that might bite them in the ass because a lot more voters are paying attention this year, and a lot more voters are looking alternatively. I think we're going to see a hung parliament. Hopefully, that's the hope, but we'll see what happens.
It's a shame because there is, like I said, a real issue out there impacting voters, and we need to address this somehow. You know, the idea of people accessing super to pay the deposit, things like that. They are not even discussed. There's no open discussion of these options that we have available to us. And
I think,
look,
it's a good. Sorry,
I was just going to say I don't even know if that's a good idea because the pressure on the market has been so sustained over so much time. The affordability just keeps going up and up. The more we do to engineer this issue, the more that we seem to fuck it up and make this market move higher and higher.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that, especially with the housing market, especially on the East Coast, that you could look into. I believe some of the smaller parties are making super voluntary as well. A few of them are running on that, so maybe that will mean that you can access your super for those sort of things. I think, and this always comes off sounding bad, but you can't have foreign investment. You've got to cut back on how much you've got to, and it's not a. By foreign investment, I mean companies that own things that aren't in the country itself. Like, I don't mind if someone's from another country, they come here, they buy the house and they live in it. That's fine. What I mean is foreign investment in terms of like organisation and corporations buying houses or people buying houses that don't live here. We've got to be a bit more sensible with that because there's no point if it's what's going to happen. And you look at Melbourne, like I said, it's like so expensive just to even rent a house. Then you're going to just cause more and more problems down the line. So,
for a long time, I think part of it is an infrastructure conversation, right? It's almost bigger than housing. It's like, how do we disperse pressure off the city, the urban environments, especially in Melbourne? We have this urban sprawl around Melbourne. It's just massive, and the pressure keeps building. And we have satellite cities that are, they're well built up cities, but there's no infrastructure, no rail network connecting the two to be able to take those pressures off. And, the great white elephant of the high-speed rail networks is, I think it has to be part of the conversation. And yet again, here we are in another election cycle, and we're not seeing any kind of grand vision for our infrastructure to be able to say to ourselves, let's take pressure off the CBDs and let's build networks, rail networks or high-speed infrastructure that enables us to move out of the suburb, out of the urban gluts. I think that has to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It's funny because where I live it's been a going joke for the past 20 years about when we're going to get a train line. We're a satellite city and we're about half an hour out of Perth. And yeah, like that's been the ongoing joke for 20 years because they're starting to build it, they reckon. But yeah, I don't think I'll ever see it finished in my lifetime.
They're doing a commission of a report of an investigation, or we on the East Coast, it's been talked about for I want to say 70 years. I don't know the history exactly, but it's been a long time in the coming, and China, meanwhile, will build several of these while we waffle about it. It's just embarrassing, really, that we can't figure this out.
To be fair, though, I'd like to see how those fast builds that the Chinese are doing last. I don't know. Do you remember seeing that bridge that fell over on the belt? Right. There was like a whole big, like they're sitting on the things, it's tilted over, and I was like, oh.
Yeah. It's also they're probably built on the bones of slaves as well. So there's probably that element to it as well. But something has to be done.
Well, they own so much of Australia. Like the Port of Darwin is on a 99-year lease, for example, to China. Singapore owns Optus, I'm pretty sure, a bunch of land in Australia. There are Chinese corporations that own land, that own farming land and cattle property. It's just like
a lot of
that stuff is owned by China. People say, "Oh, it's so good that Scott Morrison stopped Dan Andrews for doing the Belt and Road project with China." So even without that, China still owns much of Australia.
Yeah, it's been a big mistake on our part, but that's because we stopped. A good part of that's because we're not as rich a country as we probably should have been. We stopped our own manufacturing and stuff like that, and then the money came from overseas in order to prop up things like cattle stations and that, because it costs a lot of money to run those stations, and a lot of the guys aren't getting the extra people to come in and work it after them, and stations are failing. So you can't blame them. They take the money when they can get it, but it just means that it's foreign investment that's buying them up. And that includes America as well. I think America's got a few stations and stuff as well.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Plus, of course, all their military bases as well. Pine Gap, for example, middle of Northern Territory.
Yeah. We're selective about who we let, or we feel okay with some parties owning part of the land as long as they're the ones sort of holding the big guns, protecting us.
Our biggest trading partners.
Yes. It's interesting times.
Well, that's a good segue into the cash rate, isn't it, then? Because it's about to get a whole lot worse.
There's the government's coin and say, you know what, we're going to forcibly raise the interest rate. I think it's 0.35%, up from 0.10. So it's a 0.35% increase. But that's the highest this century.
It's also half what they said they were going to raise to.
That's when you've pulled all the levers, right? He's like, what can we do with the interest rate? It's 0.01. Let's put it up a little. Like, God, we've maxed out all the credit cards. What do we do? I assume this is to combat inflation, right? Because we're seeing inflationary pressures coming about all over the world now, and it's a global conversation. Turns out, guys, surprise, surprise, you can't just print money forever.
And you can't shut down the economy for 2 years.
No, it turns out you can't put everybody inside their houses and just pay them money forever. Who would have thought?
Plus that cash rate being raised is the Reserve Bank of Australia. So that's the board there is all appointed by the Treasurer. So it's all Liberal appointees.
But it's got to go up.
The RBA. But the problem is that the problem is that it's being done by the government, which means it's not done by the market. And because the market's in control, their response has to be to raise prices. And when the prices go up, that means the cost of living isn't resolved. And then people demand more money from the government, and then you get more inflation. So if that's being done to combat inflation because the government's doing it, not the market determining the interest rates, it screws over the people anyway.
So I assumed that because it was happening during an election, that it wasn't government. It wouldn't be something ScoMo was really hoping to happen, an interest rate rise, right? That's what I would assume. But you're saying that this is something that government has brought about through that the Liberal National government has been a part of the decision process.
Well, no, I'm not saying that the government was involved in it being raised. Like they said, raise it for election policy or whatever. I'm saying that it's government run. So it's not the market, it's the government. So public, not private. That's the thing I'm pointing out. It's not. It's not.
So what's your thoughts on UAP's 3% lock, Stuart? Do you think that's a good thing?
Interest rates for is they interest rates for was that housing again?
Yeah, they want to have a lock on. I think he said I'll have to get it back up, but it was a 3%. I read it on his flyer the other day. No party show. I'll just get the thing up. Yeah, it's a.
Can they even do that?
If you,
I don't know. That's what I mean. Like that's it.
It's just like we're going to do this amazing thing. It's like, can you? I'm not sure you can.
If the federal government puts a cap on interest rates, then the responsibility from the banks to increase the deposit that you need to get a loan in the first place, because they can't get as much money, so they'll try to get money elsewhere.
He wants to pass a law to keep home loan interest below 3%,
which is like great. All right, but what's the secondary impact of that decision? Like, what happens once you do that? And the likelihood is that it makes buying a house harder for people struggling. There's always a trade-off.
Yeah, they'd have a balance with some other policies if they're going to do that.
Because the idea there is, you increase the demand, but the supply's not going to go up. So then they have to raise the prices, and then because the prices go up, then it's the same situation as we were before, except
it'll
higher
make your
interest
houses
rates.
worth a shit ton more, which isn't bad for me. But I could do with the price rise in mine. Mine hasn't gone up in 8 years. So
8 years you've been stagnant. Wow, literally 40% in my area over the pandemic. It's been an increase.
We've lost him.
Yeah, he's stuttering. He's coming back to life.
Yeah.
Here he is.
There we go.
Here he is.
We got you back.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
So you're right. So you've had no price change to your property over there. That's quite a contrast to our experience in this area. What do you put it down to?
Where I am, it's been. We're just the location. I think it's more than anything. It's sort of hit us. It's sort of balanced out. Some of other properties have gone up, obviously, and so we had a price rise. I think it was maybe 10 years ago. There was a big jump, and then it sort of just teetered out a little bit from there. But ours is like we built this house, and it's roughly the same as what we paid for it at the moment. So, which is fine because we're not moving anywhere. But
yeah, you guys had the mining boom, right?
Oh, we always have mining booms,
right? But it doesn't sound like that's much of a boom where you are in terms of the property area. But other areas are seeing that increasing pressure still.
Some are closer into the city, and that the prices are a bit higher, but it's not. It's still not like crazy. I don't know your price over there, but with using Labor's example, he was saying that it's up to properties worth 950,000 in Sydney, and I was like, well, that's my house is half that. You can pay for the whole lot if you want. So you know what I mean? Like it was interesting that was their cutoff phase. I was like sitting there going, fuck, that's insane how expensive it is over there.
What gets me is that the cost of housing isn't included in inflation. The last time I looked that up, it's like housing prices aren't part of that calculation because you can rent. I believe that's accurate. and
That sounds right. Yeah.
yeah, and so the kind of the biggest factor in people's living standards is removed from those inflationary figures, which feels like just gaslighting to me. Like we're just gaslighting ourselves with those numbers. Like
What are,
clearly that. Go on.
Sorry. What are the prices like? Relatively, I wouldn't say country, but like outside the skirts, like those satellite cities you're talking about. What are those prices like out there?
It's a good question. I'd have to look it up. I know there's been migratory effects from the pandemic that have definitely impacted, and we are where I am here. We're actually about 45 minutes out of Melbourne, right? So we're not really close, but and so you could almost call us a bit of a satellite city of our own. The Mornington Peninsula is kind of, it's got its own, it's kind of its own little destination. But for us, it's been massive. I do know that there was a lot of activity in northeastern Victoria, people moving out there because we explored that region a couple of years back before the pandemic, and we get messages from real estate still, and there's a lot of activity going on, and the prices are going up for sure, just not as dramatically as where I am. We're a coastal town. We've got this. We're right near the train network into Melbourne, and there's this perfect balance. It's one of the biggest price rises in the country that we've seen.
What sort of jump are they going to in like your area? Like, are they going from
like I said,
400,000 to $1 million?
Over the course of the pandemic, we've seen 30 to 40% price rises, and that in that 2 to 2.5 year period, just crazy.
It's, you know what will go cheaper? Apartments in the city. Apartments in the city because no one's living there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. People were getting out. It was a crazy time.
Yeah, I had a few friends who did it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, the mass migration, our immigration out of Victoria will lower those prices, though.
Yes, there's also that factor as well. People are moving to Queensland. We spoke to a real estate guy recently. He said that he's just been dealing non-stop with Victorians leaving the state.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So, yeah, when your premier is yelling the sky is falling for a year and a half, people tend to listen and go elsewhere. So, I just hope there's some way that group of voters can sort of harness their energy. You almost feel like creating an expat Victorian party or something. We hate Daniel Andrews' party. Maybe we could get a Senate seat. Get a Senate seat from that in Queensland.
I guess the hope now is. I guess the hope now is that. Go, you go.
I've got the delay. Sorry, mate. It just like I say something and it just stops, and I'm like, oh. Did you see that he's in front of investigations again yesterday, Daniel Andrews?
I didn't see that, but I have hope. I have a little hope left.
He was trying to.
What's this one for?
I don't know, man. He's in front of like issues all the time these days. I can't even keep up with how many corruption stuff he's in.
And they don't stick. With. They never stick.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I kind of get the feeling that he's just now a marked man, right? I mean, the thing is that once you make people hate you, they don't tend to stop. They tend to hate you for a long. And he's made a lot of enemies in the public and in the politics of Victoria, I imagine. And so there'll be people sniping for him within his own party at some point. I don't see him getting taken down anytime soon in terms of the politics. So I think he's still doing well in the polls, which says a lot about Victoria in the polls. Victorian voters love to bend the knee, and that's just who we are, apparently. But recently there was a lot of speculation, because when he's outside, he's surrounded by 20 police officers, and that's like we've crossed this I feel like we've crossed this precipice now where the men of the people or the politicians of the people all of a sudden need to be surrounded by military grade police officers. It's like you're no longer, something's gone wrong. Something's broken when you appear to be wearing a bulletproof vest as well, and you're surrounded by 20 officers of the law. What's gone wrong in our politics? It seems that's a fairly common thing now. Old Danny boy.
Same with Mark.
I just hope that the Victorian exodus from Victoria won't be the same thing as we're seeing in the US, where the Californians are leaving to the other states, but then they turn those states blue. I'm hoping that you Victorians don't turn other states into more Labor states.
What? I'm going to vote Greens in Queensland, Stu. What have you got against? What's your problem? Come on, mate.
I was
Where to
speaking to
start?
someone. I was speaking to someone who's in New South Wales, and he was like, "I'm going to vote Greens 1 and then Lib Dem 2nd." And I was like, "Holy fuck!" He's like, I was just like, "There's such a divide with people. Everyone is over the 2-party preferred system, and even like they're going to put." Well, there's so much in there that you'd be voting for someone that you don't even necessarily align with, just so that the other fucker doesn't get in.
Well, the only way that makes sense, right? And this is an interesting one I wrote about on that ALN website, was about press freedom. The only way it makes sense to vote Greens or Lib Dems in 1-2 would be if you care about the plight of Julian Assange. So I wrote a piece on the Australian Liberty Network website talking about press freedom and Julian Assange's plight and the policy and behavior of the major players in the election. And it turns out, strangely enough, the Greens have been the biggest voice for Julian Assange over the last 10 or so years that he's been imprisoned. They've been consistently outspoken on the issue, which, for me, it's a huge one. This is a huge issue for me as a voter. If you believe Julian Assange should be in prison, I've got no time for you. That's just a incredibly stupid and absent-minded view of the world when you think that people reporting war crimes should be thrown in jail because they leaked emails, because they leaked some true information. It's like,
he's in jail without charge as well.
That's right. Yeah, we're watching the slow motion assassination of a truth teller, essentially, and
an Australian as well.
And an Australian. It's incredible that no one in the major parties will really go beyond sort of empty platitudes of press freedom. Well, fuck, mate, what are you doing? What are you actually doing? And beyond people like the Lib Dems, Greens, One Nation are very strong. Pauline Hanson's called him a modern day Ned Kelly. She loves that sort of folk hero aspect of it and has written to the Prime Minister. George Christensen, who's now a member for One Nation or a candidate for One Nation, has been very active on this issue. And we've seen people like Barnaby Joyce speak pretty eloquently on this, that he deserves his day in court at bare minimum to face whatever charges that you are accusing him of. But here we sit in 2022, 10 years since he's been in that embassy in Ecuador, and nothing has been done by our governments. And it's just so depressing, really. But yeah, if you care about that issue, the Greens are a good vote. They're a good place to put your vote. The Lib Dems are equally as strong, and One Nation too. They're also a good place to put it. That, for me, Julian Assange is a big issue.
Absolutely, it's interesting seeing, and I think it's hard because it's very easy to be black-pilled about everything. But I think it's a positive to see that parties that aren't the same, like the Pauline, who is populist right, Lib Dems as close to the libertarian at least a little bit, and the Greens all agree on an issue
Yeah.
that's important to most people. And the major parties, this is why they're losing so much support. This is why the system is, we're seeing a shift, and this is worldwide. We're seeing a shift in the system away from this left-right uniparty dichotomy that we see in every country, especially in the West. And now we're seeing this sort of this way that the left and the right can sort of work together to try and solve these issues that they tend to agree on. So.
Wouldn't it be great if we saw that hung parliament that you talked about earlier, and we saw the Lib Dems, the Greens, One Nation pull together and say, look, we're going to block supply. We're going to shut you down, bitch, unless you do something for your Australian citizen. You know,
it'd be good
something
to
like
see.
that. Yeah, that would be amazing.
Unfortunately,
take some ownership.
So, unfortunately, the Greens support press freedom, but they don't support it's a subset of the category of free speech, which they aren't so good on because they support 18C.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so that they're always calling for censoring speech they don't like. So when it comes to speech by politicians, by the press, they're supported by private citizens. They're more hostile to that. I think the only reason they're probably supporting Assange is because he's anti-US. And anti-US and the military industrial complex, which is probably why they support him rather than a broader freedom of speech issue, because we've seen that they aren't exactly a freedom of speech party.
Yeah, but you got to work with what you got. So, like, you're not always.
I know.
You're going to try and figure it out, and that's why it's a positive sign that you can see maybe a Pauline Hanson who's probably more free speech than, or at least the Lib Dems are more free speech than most parties, and they can. If you can work with the Greens in order to get this solution, then go for it. I don't care. Like, I just get it done. Like, it's ridiculous. Like I said, it's been 10 odd years or something he's been in jail for. Like, it's ridiculous that we're even still talking about it. The Australian government should have done something by now. He should be back home, and he should be protected by the government, like, or at least protected by Australia.
He's been part of deals and all kinds of negotiation processes, I imagine, but never in a good way. It's always been, we'll hang on to this and you'll do as you're told and you'll get this. So, it's always going to go in the wrong direction. It's never gone in the right direction for Julian Assange. Just sort of side tangent on free speech and big tech. The other day, I saw a Teal Independent talking about Craig Kelly, and the conversation was sort of around social media and his tendency to go off script, right? Craig Kelly has a tendency to say what shouldn't be said. And the Teal Independent, she's a fairly high profile one. I'm not quite sure of her name, but
Monica?
Say it again.
Is that Monica lady?
I'm not
She's been
100%.
pretty.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. But basically, she said that, this MP, this sitting member of parliament, has the nerve to question big tech, right? Think about that, right? Just a moment. Let's pump the brakes and think to question the policy of big tech. And it's like, hang on. So you're saying the power resides in the big multinational corporation. You're saying that not the sitting member of parliament, not the elected representative has the power in this dynamic, that the massive multinational corporation is the one that should be trusted with power and dominance over our discourse. That's what you're saying as a candidate for Australian office. It was an incredible moment there, and I think it just flies over the head of so many people, where they're like, "Yeah, of course Mark Zuckerberg has power, right? Of course we elected him, right? He was democratically elected by me logging into my Facebook account, right, every day." It's astounding how far that has sailed. That big tech now are kind of considered incumbent government almost. It's crazy. Breaks my brain.
Which is why people are so upset about Elon Musk buying Twitter, because they think they're entitled to not having him own it because of their power, their influence. In fact, I think the CEO of Truth Social is now saying that Trump influenced Elon Musk to buy Twitter. So they're suggesting that Trump told Elon Musk to buy Twitter.
No.
And that came from the CEO of Truth Social.
Who's stopped
the whole of Twitter told him to buy Twitter as well, though.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know. For it. Yeah, I don't know why they would expect us to believe that, given that Trump is Truth Social. I believe Trump has a major stake in that outfit, right? The worst people, the people who are most impacted by this buyout by Musk was the Getters of the world, the Truth Social and Gab, those alternative free speech platforms, or free speech as they were sort of labeling themselves, clearly are going to lose in this whole buyout scenario. Trump's an odd one, isn't he? Like, where does he fit in now? Do they let him back in on Twitter?
He said he won't come back.
Really?
Apparently, he released a thing saying he wouldn't go back on it. So,
and that's it. I mean, fair play to him. Like, that was when you ban the 45th president of the United States, you make a bold statement about your platform. That's for sure. But he was good for the lols. I'll give him that.
It was at least entertaining.
Yeah.
Now we've just got the gaff machine Biden. We can't bloody figure out what day it is.
And we've got the Ministry of Truth. That's fun, guys.
Yes. By ladies.
Drama theatre student by our crazy ex-girlfriend.
She's the one. She was a big proponent of the Russiagate hoax too. She was pushing it hard, apparently. She's been all in on all the misinformation.
Yeah, so. And the Hunter Biden laptop story is complete disinformation, and should lock everybody down, and all these things.
Yeah.
That
she's not the right person. They're not a good person. They shouldn't even be having it. But of all the people to pick, she's like the worst of the worst.
It almost feels like my theory on this is that this is another part of their midterms culture war battle, right? We've seen Roe v. Wade as well as part of this milieu of bonfire of bullshit, right? That is about to explode to get them what they need. It's similar to the Black Lives Matter riots of 2020. They needed this drama to get people invested in the outcomes. But to me, I kind of feel sorry for her in a way, because this woman, Nina, I can't remember her last name, the head of the Ministry of Truth, I'm calling it. She's a pawn, I think, ultimately in a game, and she's being put there for the cringe that she is. Right? We've all seen it. We're like, oh my God, you're just so annoying. And she's being used because she's so annoying, because she's so cringy, because she does weird fucking singing TikTok videos. It's all super cringe, right? And we're like, we're meant to listen to what you. Hang on, we're meant to listen to. It's totally. She's being used in a way, and when you think about it, her life will never be the same again. She's like the Ministry of Truth. Like, what kind of life do you have after that?
She'll go down in meme legend status, though.
She'll go down in history as kind of the almost the 1984, the symbol of our sort of degeneration into complete and utter authoritarianism. Like, that's just insane to consider yourself that authoritarian, or to be able to make dictates on what people can think and say. It's just insane. I kind of feel sorry for her. I also know that this is part of culture war, and there is no court in that land that I can see will hold that. Do you guys think that this lasts beyond the democratic government? Do you think this board of disinformation, governance board of disinformation, as it's theoretically, do you think it lasts, or is this a play? Is this is it theatre, literally, because she's a theatre drama girl? Is that what we're watching?
I think
It'll last in some way.
Yeah, it's like the Patriot Act. Once that power gets put in place, if it gets another one in there, they just use it. And I think with the heading towards the digital ID system and everything, I think it's actually quite a pivotal part. I think the choice of her might have been for, like you said, for the obnoxious and cringe that she is, but then people don't take it seriously if she's cringe. If it was a serious person, if you'd put in a Goebbels or someone in there, then, you know what I mean, people would be a bit more concerned, but she's just some weirdo that sings TikTok videos. So
Goebbels with a skirt. Goebbels, dancing Goebbels. That's what we've got.
Yeah. So
and don't forget too, don't forget too, this board is under the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, and the DHS was set up by Bush Jr. So it was made by the Republicans. So it's being enabled by the Republicans. They complain about this new board thing, but the concept of the DHS itself, they don't care. They're happy with. So even if it is changed in some way, it'll still have the same infrastructure there in place for it to come in again, and eventually it will come in and it will stick. I don't expect it to be gone anytime soon.
The only way it'll change is if Spike Cohen or Dave Smith gets in, and they'll just abolish all the three-letter agencies. Man, I don't think the Republican. These people are still under the mystique of that the Republicans are different to the Democrats. They're the same thing. It's just whoever's in power uses the power. It's a rigged system. It's the same here. I think it's the same with our Liberals and our Labor here. I think they're very much the same thing. You can see by how many votes. Sorry, go.
I feel like the Ted Cruzes of the world, the
I hate Ted Cruz.
yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm trying to come up with another prominent Republican here in terms of candidates for the 2016. There was Ted Cruz. Who is the guy? I mean, we know Ron Paul and his son Rand. We know Rand is gonna push hard on this, right? I think we know a few prominent Republicans who see this as a step too far.
Massey would be one.
Yeah, totally. There's a contingent of people who would like to burn shit down, right? And this is burn shit down territory, right? If you ask me, like this is 1984. Like we're going there if we don't stop, right? At least the US is, and we're fucking following behind them fast. But I am still white pilled by Musk's move, and I have faith that the Republicans will try and get rid of this disturbing development, because it is thoroughly disturbing. I might be wrong, but I haven't given up just yet on the MAGA movement. Hopefully, stirring shit up enough so that people actually do something. We'll see. If Trump runs again, if DeSantis gets into power, I think he removes this governance board of bullshit. If that's my hot take for the day. Fingers crossed.
I doubt it, honestly.
Yeah, I know. I
don't expect anyone to.
Especially DeSantis is an ex-military thing, so I doubt he'd get rid of DHS.
Yeah, he won't. But he won't get rid of DHS. I'm not saying he'll get rid of DHS, but he'll get rid of this, right? He's already called it out and said, "Not on my watch." So, I also think that these guys, DeSantis, Trump, they're populists. They're not party machine guys. They're not playing by the usual rules. Fingers crossed. I might be wrong, But let's hope so.
Speaking of gaffes and Joe Biden, did you guys see the update in the Albanese gaffe? So he did a press conference yesterday. And brought handwritten notes to it. So on Thursday he was grilled on Labor's. On Thursday he was grilled at a press conference about Labor's 6-point policy of the NDIS. He forgot it, and then yesterday he brought a cheat sheet along with him. He brought handwritten notes that had the 6 policy points and a typed response if you got quizzed on it.
I'm okay with that. I think that's. I'd much rather have someone say, "I've got these votes."
But he brought it, and then it got seen, but then he didn't admit to it. That's the problem there. That he was seen with it, and he didn't admit to having it. After I'll share the screen of the article from news.com.
I find this whole thing.
Sorry,
go on.
Sorry, you go.
No, okay. I mean, my take on this is, it's kind of curious to me that why this is a thing. Why all of a sudden we got gotcha moment sort of questions going, and I do think that underlying it is a real instinctive notion that Albanese doesn't know his brief, like doesn't dig too deep into things, and that if Scott Morrison didn't know his brief, we'd also know about it, right? That they're going to try and get Scott as well, surely. Like they're gunning for him. Yeah. So why is it that only Albanese is failing these sort of pop questions? And I get it. It is a bit childish, almost, to sort of to try and get him in those gotcha moments. But it's also like, this is a 6-point plan. That's why you make a 6-point plan, so you can fucking remember it, right? You have 6 bullet points that you need to go over with your team every day, right? That's why you have a 6-point plan.
In fairness, like there's obviously a lot of things going on, especially if you're one of the major parties. But I think they're not owning the notes. I don't have a problem with someone having notes. I think what was such a fresh air, if you go back to the American politics when Kayleigh McEnany was the press secretary, was her big binder full of colour, like her big binder. And I'm like, I'd much rather someone who is then talking. So if Albanese has his notes and then he has anything and he looks at them, I'm okay with that, because at least then he's, paying attention to what he's doing versus like just then getting caught out, not knowing what the hell you're talking about. But I don't think it's enough to save him, though.
I guess to push back on that a bit, Kayleigh McEnany needed a binder because she was doing it every day, right? Every day. And she's not actually a politician. Yeah, and she's not actually running for office either. And Albanese's like, I want to run this country. What's the unemployment rate, Albo? Sorry, don't know. And it's not a great. It really is. You have to know the fundamentals, and you have to know the policy pretty well if you're going to run as leader of the country. Like I said, if they could get ScoMo with the same gotcha moments, they would. So it's hang on. Why is it that we're only hearing about one? That's what gets me.
And don't forget, too, that the media spent the last 3 years shitting on Morrison, whereas it's 6 weeks they can go after Albanese. So they're going to do that because they haven't had a chance to yet.
That's true. Yeah, he's had it pretty easy, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's the same points. When it comes to Morrison, it's the same points over and over again. Nothing new or innovative. When it comes to Albanese, these are all new things that he's saying. So,
yeah, it's crazy. It's like this is your time to shine, Helbo. and he doesn't seem to be knocking it out of the park. There's almost, I sense, a bit of frailty and nervousness about him. When he gets to those moments, he's like, "Oh fuck, they've got me again." Right? I saw the look in his eyes. It's like a deer in the headlights. And that interaction yesterday at that press conference, it's not very cordial. It's quite abrasive. That journalist was really yelling, "What are the 6 points? What are the 6 points?" over and over again. And you could see the guy beside him. I can't remember. He's like the second in charge, Labor guy. You could see him even go, "Oh shit, he's going down again in flames." This is this moment of just sheer terror in the eyes of Albanese, and his voice kind of cracked a little bit, and it's just not a good look. At the end of the day, you need to project strength, right? If you're going to be the leader of the country.
We haven't had that for a while, but
I mean, you could say that ScoMo was the guy who stood up as the guy. He's the guy that stood up as the guy doing the whole stop the boats, border defense thing. I remember you remember the press conferences every day they were doing them, where it was like this militarized thing where ScoMo would get up and talk about that as a military operation almost. So he kind of cut his teeth in that border patrol, in that sort of dynamic, in that area. And I think he's been a pretty solid performer in terms of fronting and presentation since then. I'm not saying I agree with his policy, but I think he comes off as a guy, apart from when tragedy hits and fires and all that sort of thing. As soon as he has to shake someone's hand, he's in trouble. But yeah, in a press conference, I think he does okay.
Well, he's a career politician. He has his stuff. He's been there for a while. And again, Albanese should know better. He was Deputy Prime Minister under Rudd, second time round. So he should know what he's doing. You'd think so, at least.
He's been around. Yeah, he's been around.
I think Labor's still worried about the ghost of last election, where it was their election to lose, and they lost.
Yeah.
On the short end. So I think they're still worried about that.
Yeah, I was looking at the news poll results the other day. I think it was 3 days ago, maybe the news poll results came out. And, you kind of want to track them, but you also know that we live in this era where polls can no longer be trusted, right? We saw that at the last election where they had, I think it was the 4-point lead going into, I think it was 52-48 going into the election with Shorten. And then I remember this clear as day. We were in the UK. My partner and I were in the UK on a trip, and we're like, Liberals won. We're like, what? How? And I had to get on Twitter to watch the reeing, the screaming, the 1,000 voices that sung out in silence. The complete and utter shit show that was social media to see all that suffering, but those poll results just weren't aligning with reality. There was just going to be this jarring reality that came to actually polling day. Now, one would think pollsters have figured this out, right? That's their job. Yeah, I'm a bit with you, centrist. I'm not sure they've figured it out, because I think ultimately at the end of the day, we've there's been such an effort to I don't want to say criminalize, but to paint people centre right as something, as monsters. There's been such an effort to monopolize morality on the left that anyone else outside of their window is kind of this demon that they don't admit to being a demon, right? So they just don't admit it. And so the fact that the polls are where they are, well, and what that means, I don't know.
I think what's positive from those polls, though, is because even if you are taking them with a pinch of salt, the high rate of independent minor, which doesn't include the Greens. I think the last one I saw, which was a few weeks ago, had it. It was they broke it down to Labor, Liberal, Greens, and minor independents were at 30-something%. That's a third of the vote on people who are just doing the polls. That's a big number. So if that number's right, that could show like a massive swing towards this hung parliament. So, but you don't know.
The hope keep the hope.
There was a US study came out in 2020. I think it was 2020, and the study said that conservatives are more likely to identify as leftists than vice versa when it comes to exit polls and election polling, and that's proven true at a variety of times. Brexit was meant to be. There's expected that it would be a win for Remain. Scotland independence vote, that was again Remain. Trump 2016 in 2020 they got the margin really wrong for Trump losing that election. 2019 in Australia, there's this whole raft of elections where they've said it'll be the left-wing side will win, and the right's one. It's usually been a small margin, but it's still a right-wing win. The polling was really wrong because people are more likely to identify as being left-wing than right-wing for polling purposes because of that social stigma around being conservative.
Yeah,
I've been doing as many of them as I can. Those polls, I was like, fuck both of them. I'm like, who would you prefer, ScoMo or Albo? Neither. Get rid of them. Get rid of them all.
Yeah, I think it's sitting at 53-47 currently, two-party preferred.
Yeah,
which
two-party preferred. Thank you.
With Labor ahead.
Labor ahead.
Yeah,
but Morrison's still the Prime Minister though. The thing is though that the Liberals often lose that two-party preferred vote, but they win the preferred Prime Minister. It's been consistent that you've seen for the last 10 years or so. That it's always been the Conservatives, Liberals have the better Prime Minister option than the left.
It's a sad stage because the polls are set up, right? So that's why I've been doing a lot of them as well, just to see how they do their polling. And a lot of it is like, who would you prefer, Labor or Liberal? I'm like, this is ridiculous. We're in a democracy where you've got lots of representation. The reason these stats, and you can control how people vote by doing that, by just presenting the two options, because then if people read the poll and they see that it's Liberals leading, oh shit, I better vote Labor up the top. When truthfully, honestly, is you could have a heap of people who would prefer to vote minor parties in our system, and then you can use those poll numbers to sway people's votes. The systems, that whole polling system's not right, I don't think.
Yeah, and then how do you account when people who want to vote minors are told Labor or Liberal? They're more likely to say Labor because they'd rather not have a Liberal government. So they're talking about who they'd rather not have than who they rather would have, if that makes sense. Yeah, they answer those polls in accordance to the inverse of what the question is actually being asked.
Yeah, polls can't be trusted, it would seem, and you're right, centrist, that they're leading people into a false binary that they have to choose between the majors, and it's part of the problem is that kind of discussion in the media around the two-party preferred. It's like, well, there's more to this. There's more to it.
Yeah. I'd love when Jerry's finished on her campaign trail, we should get her back on to talk about because she knows a lot about the Roman history and how the democracy and that was set up there. So that'll be a good chat later on. I reckon we should get her back on.
After the election, we've got 2 weeks to go. I thought that exactly. Maybe as a final point to talk about, because we've hit the hour mark now, would be the Solomon Islands agreement, which came out last week, I think, and then how that affects us.
Yeah.
So there's talk of an alliance between the Solomon Islands and China, which is not good for us.
Yeah. And not just any kind of alliance, but potentially a military partnership of some sort, right? Which
I'll guarantee.
And you said it was announced last week, but it's like, how long has this been in the making? And also part of that is how much has Australian influence or lack of, or lack of support, all these sort of variables that come into play here. It's like, ultimately talking about a developing nation in the Solomon Islands that's had a lot of instability, and when somebody comes to you with a bucket full of money and says, we're here to help, what do you do? What do? You listen for a start, right? And you pay attention. That's for sure. And I think our Australian approach is probably dissipated over time in terms of those buckets of money, right?
It's still a lot. Fucking a lot of money.
Okay, well, yeah. No, I imagine it is.
When I heard how much it was, and like I'm the least concerned about, like, obviously it's not ideal, but at the same time I'm like, we can't afford to keep funding other countries anyway. We've got a housing crisis for going on, and we're giving away billions of dollars every year to a country so your tax dollars are going to another country that you're trying to keep out of China's hands. I'm like, we could probably do with that money back home, to be honest.
Yeah.
The problem is that. Sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, at some point we have to prioritize our own interests, and it has to be that balance, right? But it just seems that it's an impossible task to compete with that Chinese juggernaut that seems to want to control and influence, and is not playing on an even playing field with us. It would seem, with their monetary system, with their whole ability to control their currency and these sort of power systems that they have at their disposal, that we don't seem to have the same tools
yet.
See, the problem is that the Solomon Islands are in the Pacific proper. So the problem there is, you've got the Five Eyes Alliance, which is us, UK, Singapore, New Zealand, and the US. Oh, no, sorry, not Singapore.
Canada.
Oh, yeah, us, Canada, New Zealand, the US, and the UK. And the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which is us, India, Japan, the US, which are based around monitoring China. And so far, the strategy has been to contain them in the South China Sea. But if they have the Solomon Islands on their side, that's the middle of the Pacific. So suddenly it changes that security dialogue there, that you've got to now worry about the middle of the Pacific being potentially a Chinese threat. And the problem there for the election is that that justifies AUKUS and all of the Morrison government's military spending, because suddenly there's a new threat. So suddenly they're justified. Before the election, Labour was attacking them. I know Penny Wong was pretty strong on talking about, all the spending, like 171 billion to build 8 submarines with the US. And then money being spent on tanks and then a missile development program with the US. It's just like all this defense spending, and now it's justified. So now Labour can't push them on the defense issue because now you've got a new threat.
I don't get why it takes so long to build a sub. Like fucking. I'm like, what? How do these guys get in these government contracts? This is fucking ridiculous. Like, if I did that on any of my construction jobs, imagine Jesus. Oh.
It's taxpayer money, right? So everything takes a little longer when it's not your money.
Open source everything. Open source it all.
Yeah, look, it's terrifying. We're staring down the barrel of a socialist bent government coming into power, with well-intentioned, motivations, but not necessarily looking to project strength or power, or to be on an aggressive stance with players like China, and then we have constant rumblings around the world about how China is infiltrating the politics of nations, of bringing money into our politics and influencing MPs. We've seen those scandals take people down in the Labor Party. And I know that there's people in the Liberal Party who are also a little too cozy, with the Chinese Communist Party as well. So it's just terrifying, really. And I don't know that we see a solution presenting itself anytime soon.
Yeah, unless the election goes the way I'm fingers crossed for, I think doesn't matter if it's Liberal or Labor that get in. This whole system that China runs with the social credit score is definitely something that our governments, including the USA, France, as soon as Macron got voted back in, he was within 2 days announcing the digital ID framework, which is what we're doing here as well. If you want to check that, you can go to the federal government website in Australia. I've been posting the graph everywhere. Essentially, they want to control everything. The government wants to control all of it, your banks, all that stuff. So doesn't matter if it's Liberal or Labor, these guys, whoever gets in, that's what they're pushing. So we've got to hope. Yeah.
Social credit score, here we come.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's probably it'll end up being that. Like, I'm not sure. They don't really have on there. I haven't seen it on the website talking about like the credit score ratings. But once that system's in, that's what they'll do. There's no doubt. So,
well, I would argue it's already here with vaccination status. With
that was how to get the infrastructure in.
Yeah, vaccination status is impacting what services you can have as a citizen. Yeah. That's the ship sailed. It's why people don't get why you get so upset about this. It's like you can't burst the seal on this. You don't want to break the seal. You got to. There's no going back once you undo it. We know you've got good intentions, but if you break that seal, there's going to be another crisis. There's going to be another politician that comes along and tells you that things are at crisis state and we need to act for safety. Yeah. Everybody, safety.
The moment they mandated an injection, so like even our previous vaccines didn't have this sort of like ruling around it. The moment they mandated you have to put something in your body was the moment everyone should have said no. It doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter about the vaccine, doesn't matter about the efficacy. It could be 100% efficacy. It could be Ebola, which killed 50% of people. Never, ever do you give the government control to put something in your body, because that's when it goes. And once they can do that, it's like, I get that the idea is to try and stop a spread of a virus. You could make many arguments for it, but the moment you give them that power, it doesn't stop. They can take it to do whatever they want. So it's very dangerous precipice that we went past. I'm hoping we can save it, but yeah, it's.
I mean, I guess at the end of the day, you could argue that we still have the choice, right? We could still not get it. We just lose our rights. We lost some of our rights as citizens.
Yeah, the main one is you can't work.
Yeah, well, and which is tremendous. Yeah, that's just ridiculous. Like, that's crossing the Rubicon, as they say. I think someone says that. People say that, right? Crossing the Rubicon. That's a thing.
It's a Roman history thing. So that's a Jerry question.
Okay. I'll tweet it at her.
I think it's Roman. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely it's like I don't think it's done. Like, I think we can still crawl our way back, but it's going to take a massive push, and I suppose that's why I've obviously been quite advocating for some of the minor parties in this upcoming election, because I see how important. Like, this really will be, for us going forward, the most important election in our lifetime. This is huge.
It's definitely a pivot point. Whether we can start the fight back, I believe that the fight back is going to take a lot longer, especially for places like Victoria. That it's a long game to sort of get back to those values. But
we've got to open that door. That's the problem.
We do.
We need to open that door.
Yeah, there needs to be some kind of interference into the two-party system, I think, to make it viable to move forward. They need to be stopped. They need to be taught a lesson, right? There needs to be some accountability at the end of the day. ScoMo needs to know that he fucked up, right? And didn't defend Australians' rights and didn't stand up enough to the states. And Labor needs to know that we're not just going to roll over and let them just do whatever they want to their citizenry, right? we need to have some checks and balances. Hopefully we can get that from some of the miners.
I think it's probably a good place to wrap up on. If there's any concluding points that either of you have before we finish up.
I mean, I would just like to say this election cycle has I've never been less interested in an election cycle, which is kind of crazy, right? Because it's so important. And maybe I've got this weird black pilled, white pilled thing where I'm like, I believe the general trend is always towards freedom over time, but I am kind of the mind that it gets worse before it gets better where we are now. So I'm a little disengaged with the whole thing, but because ScoMo or Albo, I think they're both horrible. How long is it till the election?
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
One fortnight. Exactly.
Okay. Well, we'll do this again next week and watch this shit show unfold some more.
Yes.
Before I go, then, I want to plug a website. It's been around for quite a long time. It's called clueyvoter.com. It has all your Senate candidates, so you can vote below the line. You can then tweak who you prefer out of your parties, move them up and down to who you agree with, who you disagree with, and it allows you to print off the ballot so that you can go and do, so you can pre-print it, you take it in, it takes all the stress of labeling the boxes underneath the line, you've got it all pre-planned, and you can go through, and what it also does is it wakens you up to a few parties that you may never have heard of that are running in your seat, so they might have policies that better suit you, so it's a good way to get a bit more information in, and if we can put the majors last, that's going to be a big thing in this election, so.
Awesome.
And before we finish up, we have another live stream tomorrow, usual time, 10 a.m. AEST, 8 p.m. EDT. I'll be joined by Zaya Returns to talk about the National Party in New South Wales, the only state where they are part of the government with the Liberal Party in a coalition. Other than that, see you guys then.
See ya.
Awesome.